Hey, 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 happy Tuesday, everybody. Happy Tuesday. This is Juanita Williams. I am a purpose conduit. I am the link to Life Beyond Pain and the channel to Discovering Purpose. And this is today's Tuesday Truths. So we are continuing with the trauma wound interviews. And today I would like to welcome the beautiful Diana Vargas. So,
Right.
Diana, I'm going to turn it over to you. You can continue to introduce yourself and then tell us, share your story, share your testimony.
Awesome. Well, thank you. First and foremost, let me say thank you for having me on your platform. I truly do appreciate it. Um, I'm Diana Vargas. I am a mother. I'm a wife. I'm a mother of four, motivational speaker, author. I work for social services when I'm not doing all of the other jobs that I just listed. I'm on social media. So my social media handles are Astro Speaks on both IG and on TikTok. And I do have a Facebook group, Healing from My Truth, where I just share my random thoughts. They typically don't have any purpose. They just thoughts that come to my head, and I just like to share them with people and just to receive feedback or just start a dialogue that may be taboo in certain communities. That's pretty much about me. Also, I am a childhood trauma survivor and a domestic violence abuse survivor as well. Things that I don't like to talk about too much, but I realize that my healing comes with a purpose. It may not be for me, but it may be for someone else. And what started me on that journey was my 40th birthday. So you tell me to jump right into it, so let's jump right into it. So essentially, I grew up in what I considered was pretty norm. And unfortunately, I realized that it wasn't. So I grew up in the Bronx, New York, to a single mother who was supported by her mother, my grandmother. She had two brothers, and I had cousins. And I grew up in a household where spankings was just the norm. And I accepted it and I tolerated it, but for so long. And what I like to say is I was divinely created to know that my abuse was not right for me. Some people can accept abuse and make their lives better. Unfortunately for me, it was not the case. It essentially conditioned me to struggle with love. It conditioned me to be bitter. It conditioned me to be miserable. It conditioned me to be a lot like the person who was raising me. I've experienced a lot of hardships because of my conditioning, such as homelessness, such as, well, I'm not going to say domestic abuse, but I correlate the two only because when you're abused by your parent and begin to believe that that is real, you anticipate that everyone else is going to treat you that way, and that is your norm, and that is how you relate to love. It took me a very long time to realize that that was not the case, and it took me till 40. So some of the things that I experienced growing up, my mother, she cut me with a knife. She cut my right pinky. I had to get 6 stitches in my pinky. To be quite honest, I really don't even know. I don't remember the incident that led up to why she cut me. But I do remember her taking me to Union Hospital on Fordham Road in the Bronx, telling me to lie to the doctors about how I received that cut. And I dealt with it. And I did as she asked, knowing that it was wrong, but I did as she asked, and I lied about it. Another trauma that I endured, I don't like Happy Meals. And as an adult, you would think, all right, well, you have 4 children. To be quite honest, my oldest is 22. I have a second oldest who's 16. I have a 10-year-old and I have a 5-year-old. My 10-year-olds and 5-year-olds have just benefited from eating Happy Meals. My 22-year-old and my 16-year-olds never had McDonald's Happy Meals. And the reason being is because I was conditioned to believe that Happy Meals were associated with whoopings. And the reason is, when I was a kid, my mother used to collect Happy Meal toys to give as trinkets at my birthday parties that she would throw me. And one year she was saving Kermit the Frog, Gonzo, and Miss Piggy. And I remember those toys because that was the catalyst that forever changed my life. That was the catastrophic event, I like to call it, that forever changed my view on my mother. She had these toys, and as a kid, as a curious kid, you take them, you touch them, you play with them, and that's exactly what I did. And it didn't take me until I was 30 years old to remember what happened to the toys. But in the moment that she asked me what happened to them, I didn't know. I didn't remember what happened to them. I just knew that I took them and they got lost somehow. When I was 30, out of nowhere, the random thought, the memory came back to me. And I have this saying, memories are our connection to a time and space. And I don't know what put me back in that time and space, but allowed me to remember it. And I did. And I remembered that my uncle took me to the store. I took the toys. He bought me some candies. And in taking out the candy, I put the toys in and threw the toys in the garbage. And I lost them. And for that, I got a whooping. I remember hiding in my toy box from my mother behind that whooping. And I remember that it was something that made me fear my mom. To this day, at 41, there are a lot of things in life that I should be afraid of. I'm not. But there is one thing that I am, and that is my mother. And that's not something that I'm proud of. I'm 40 years old. I still fear being in the same room with her. I still fear breathing the same air as her. The thought of her, even as I'm speaking, I feel my stomach turning. And that is a fear. I know that, and I identify it. Other things that she did to me, as I said, she cut me. Cabbage Patch dolls. Oh. When I was a kid, anybody born in the 80s know that Cabbage Patch dolls were the biggest thing to hit the planet. And she had bought a Cabbage Patch doll that had real hair. And I thought the doll was for me, but I guess it was for her to practice. And she bought this doll and she rolled her hair with rollers. And of course, as a curious kid, I went and I touched it. I took the rollers out. Well, that warrants me a whooping. Now, help me understand how a child playing with a child's toy gets a whooping. I would never understand, but that was a reason to whoop me. Another incident, I had my uncles, and sometimes I feel bad about telling our family business, but one thing that I realize in our community is we're conditioned to believe that our business is supposed to stay in our house. And I truly, truly, truly wish that I would have spoken up more. There was an incident where my uncle, he was a heroin addict. He got really high and he told our family that he was going to throw all of us off the terrace. And I went to school and I told. Well, that was the incident in which I learned that in POCs, persons of color's family, we don't talk about that. We don't say anything. We keep our mouth shut, or we'll suffer the consequences. And for me, the consequences was getting a whooping, being transferred out of that school and going to a new school. And in preparing for our talk, it seemed like I don't identify with religion. So what I would say is the Most High. The Most High started to put more memories into me, strange as it sounds. And it seems like the more I talk about what I endured as a child, the more certain memories come back to me that I guess that I placed so far back into my mind that I didn't want to think about it. And that's from trauma. I just happened to remember just the other night in preparing. I'm like, well, what, so many things have happened to me. What do I want to share? What do I want to talk about? And the reality of it is I'm going to talk about everything. I'm going to share everything because it made me who I am. It made me the mother, it made me the woman, it made me the wife, it made me the friend that I am, even down to the employee that I am. My mother's conditioning shaped and molded me to a person that I realized at 40 I didn't like. And one of the memories that I remembered is from that incident of me telling the police, telling the school that my uncle was going to throw us off the terrace. I had to go to therapy. And as an adult, I understand why that decision was made. As a child, it never really made any sense. Being a parent now, I understand that what the teachers was doing for me was in my best interest because I was suffering through trauma and didn't realize that I was experiencing trauma. Hence the reason why they sent me to therapy to try to nip it in the bud before it got progressively worse. I didn't get it. And to be quite honest, I remember just sitting around playing with blocks, and I guess being pretty much observed. I don't know what they got out of it, but evidently it was something. But therapy never continued after that one session, which I wish I would have had. Going on in my life, things got progressively worse. My mother, what I will say is this before I even go any further. I don't say these things about my mom to bash her. I don't say these things about her to, make people look at her differently, because my reality is I love my mother. I do not like her. I don't like her as a person. I I wouldn't, if I had a choice, I wouldn't have chose her for a parent. And unfortunately, that's who I got. So I live with it. It is what it is. But I don't share my stories. Oh, excuse me, my testimony. Somebody corrected me and told me I got to stop saying stories. So I don't share my testimony to hurt her or to put my family business in the street. I do it because I realize people are suffering from the same abuse. It might not be the same traumas, but they identify. And we as a culture, as a people, do not talk about it enough. We are quick to condemn someone for doing something outside of the culture, but we're not quick to condemn the family members that abuse us, that molest us, that traumatize us, that torture us. My level of torture I have endured on so many different levels that it's a wonder that I'm still here, to be quite honest. I've tried to commit suicide twice. I guess the Most High said, not today, because I have a plan for you. In that moment, I didn't understand, but now I do. And again, as it got progressively worse growing up, there were things that I just swept under the carpet and didn't address. I tried not to say anything about it. When I was about 13, now this whole time growing up, when I didn't have a dad. I didn't have a dad in the household. I never questioned where my dad was, because I grew up in a household with two strong women. An uncle that was a heroin addict and an uncle that was an alcoholic. And that was my norm. I never thought about dads. Like, to be quite honest, I didn't even say the word dad until he was on our answering machine. And the crazy thing about it is, I'm from the Bronx. And if anybody is familiar with New York, they know that there are several bridges that lead from the Bronx to several different boroughs. Well, where I live was literally not even 5 miles away from my dad my whole life. He lived across the bridge in Manhattan my whole entire life, like so close that I could walk to his house, and had no interest in getting to know me, no interest in wanting to be a part of my life until I was 13, when he thought he was dying. And that year happened to be a year of, it was a lot, because that was the same year that my grandmother got diagnosed with cancer. And she got diagnosed with cancer of the hemoglobin. And if you know anything about that, you know that's the blood. So there's no curing that. That is just a slow death, slow, painful, agonizing death. And that was the year that I was graduating from junior high. So there were a lot of events taking place in my life that at that point in time in my life should have been beautiful memories. But for me, they were traumatic. I spent my summer taking care of my grandmother while my mother spent up my grandmother's retirement, ran up her credit card, barely came through to visit her. And she left me with her mother. But I say that to say this, because as I got older, I had to go back and I had to look at different things that my mother did to me, and I had to find the correlation as to why she did it. And that point in time in my life put a lot of things into perspective. Here you have a daughter whose mother is terminally ill, but she doesn't want to take care of her. Why? And I would never get the answer to that question. But as I was going through my healing journey and doing my shadow work, those are questions that I started to ask, to try to make sense to me as to why I experienced what I experienced growing up in her household. Unfortunately, my dad didn't die till 10 years later. Whew. That was a headache and a half. But my grandmother did die that summer. And that was the first time that I attempted suicide. Little did I know, I can laugh about it now, But when you're 13 going on 14 and you just lost the one person that will protect you from everything at all costs, it's like, really, I have to go pack my stuff and leave my Nana's house to go live with my mother? Traumatizing for me, just the thought of it. And to be honest, it wasn't like I had to go far. My mother moved in literally across the street from my grandmother, so I didn't have to go far. It wasn't like I didn't see my mother, but just the thought of me being under her for 24/7, it didn't sit well with me. So I had taken a whole bottle of iron pills, and I thought that I was going to do something, but in the same breath, I knew that I really didn't want to do that, because, and this is not to make light of people who choose to take that route, but people who definitely make that decision and it's made up, they don't share that they're going to do it. They don't share that they've done this in order to get this result. I went to school and I told a friend of mine, shout out to Eileen Velez, I was mad at her for a very long time, but if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have been here. I told her and she told the teacher, and the teacher called the police and they took me to the hospital, only to tell me I was going to be backed up. I was going to be constipated. But it is what it is. I accepted it. But that shows you at a young age how deep my depression got. And I couldn't identify it. I didn't know that I was in depression. I didn't understand that I was in that mode, but that's where I was. After I got through that, I began to AWOL from school. I didn't go. I got left back in the 9th grade 3 times. I am a super freshman, as you will call it. And I'm not proud of that, but I say that because a lot of parents don't know the signs of depression. There are no clear-cut identifying signs for when a teenager is going through depression, because teenagers are so erratic regardless. They're going to do whatever their hormones tell them to do. So you don't know that your child is suffering from depression. You don't know that your child is experiencing that. You just think they're being a teenager. And me, I was suffering. I tried to commit suicide. I was cutting school. I wasn't going to school. I was hanging out with the wrong crowd. And I found my very first boyfriend at 14, and I was smitten. I was so in love. He wasn't the best thing, but for me in that moment, he made me feel safe. I was happy. He had his own place and I could run away to, and drink my St. Ives and have my OE and smoke the joints. I just didn't have to go home. I didn't have to be with my mother. So I became a runaway. And after a while, my mother got a PINS petition. And I just was like, okay, what exactly is a PINS petition? Well, it's a parent in need of supervision. And it puts a judge in charge of your life. And essentially, this judge would tell my mother what the rules and regulations were for me. And I was like, okay, I hear you. Don't mean I'm going to listen, but all right. What are the consequences if I don't listen? Well, you get taken away from your home and you have to go to a group home. Hot damn. So what did I do? I ran away. I got in trouble and I had to go to court. And that is when they put me in a diagnostic center. And I went to a diagnostic center for 3 months. And in that time, I didn't know that they were observing me constantly, that they were documenting what it was that I was doing, everything, just every single thing that I was doing. And I was just living my best life. Like, okay, I don't have to go home to Shelly. That's my mother. I didn't have to go home to her. I was free. I can AWOL. If I ran away, they weren't going to try to stop me. They would just document. And it was the best 3 months of my life. And after all was said and done, they comprised this packet of information about you. And I didn't know about that packet until later in life, when I decided that I was going to move out, and I went digging, which is to this day concerns me. I had to ask for my birth certificate and social security card when I moved out, and it never made sense to me at all, but neither here nor there. During that transition, I ended up coming across those documents, but I'll get to that in a few. So that was the first step of getting help for me. I guess, the judge see fit, okay, this young lady is running away from school. This young lady is doing things to put herself in danger. She's not listening to her mother. But the one thing that resonates and sits with me to this day is no one ever asked me what the problem was. They were so busy trying to find a solution for a problem that they didn't even know existed. The only thing that they got from it was, okay, well, she's a teenager who's acting out, whose grandmother passed away. But nobody ever asked me about my past history. And then when they did speak with my mom, again, back to what happens in the house stays in the house. So there was no dialogue there. There was nothing to be said. It was just like, oh, well, she didn't have a dad, and, my brother's on drugs. But nobody ever went in depth with the conversation. Nobody ever asked, like, what's the root cause of the problems? How can we fix it? It's just a matter of Diana was the issue and she needed to be addressed. So they referred me to a more restricted facility, a diagnostic center. And you would think, because I had all of these issues, that my mother would send me there, but that only showed me that she still wanted to have a sense of control. She didn't send me to the restricted center. She actually told them that she wanted me to come home. And that's when it became more evident that this woman was certified 730. She was crazy. And when I say that, I mean, she did things like that just didn't make sense to me. And I call it a level of petty that I've never seen. To be quite honest, I know this is kind of strange, but I respect it. So much so that her level of petty, I incorporate in the things that I do. And just to give you an example, my mother would feel a certain way about me or something that I did, but she wouldn't say anything. She wouldn't express it to me. She would find a song and she would play it over and over and over and over again. And I didn't realize that until I took Psychology 101, that this was what we called conditioning. And that's why I tend to use that word a lot, because in my studies, I've learned that that's exactly what I experienced, conditioning. And one song, and the reason why I chose, and this is going to speak to the testament as why I chose to wear this shirt. The one song that she would play over and over again was a song by Tupac called Wonder Why They Call You Bitch. And I used to love Tupac. Now, you know what? I still do. I'm not going to say I used to, but this one song, I could not. It took me to my 40th birthday to get through the song without crying. And the lyrics of the song, if no one has ever heard it, I implore you to go listen to it. For a mother, and I am a mother now. So thinking about it from the standpoint of a child and now a mother, I would never in my life play that song for my child. The lyrics, he talks about a young lady who was very promiscuous, which I don't ever deny that I was, because essentially from having lack of love from my parent, I did a lot of things that I was not proud of, a lot of things that I can't take back, in order to have a place to stay, in order to find love, or just in order to be away from her. So yes, I was promiscuous. And I put myself at risk. And this song talks about a young lady who did the same exact thing. However, from the standpoint of Tupac, it's just like he sees her and he knows that she's going down the wrong road, but he can't do anything to help her. And, he's calling her a whore. She's a slut. She's this, she's that. She's going to die of AIDS. And as a 14-year-old girl, it's like, you hear this song, the beat is catchy, but then when you realize your mother is playing this song over and over and over and over again, she's talking to you. And it traumatized me to a point where I could not sit through that song. I could not listen to it. I would cry. As soon as I heard the beat come on, I would just start crying. Another song that she would traumatize me with, which to this day I have not even heard since I've left her house, and I left her house at 17, is Man in the Mirror by Michael Jackson. She would play that. She would make me get up and stand in the mirror and sing that song to myself. And I was just like, I didn't get it. And I mean, it's a powerful song, but when you think about, for me, the person who's introducing it to me and the manner in which she's introducing it to me, it wasn't to uplift me. It was to tear me down. It was to tell me that I have ugly flaws. I have character traits that are unbecoming, that I wasn't worthy of this life. And I need to start with the man in the mirror. I need to fix myself. And it's like, but lady, you conditioned me to be exactly who you wanted me to be. When you beat me down, when you destroyed any thought of me having a high self-esteem, you destroyed me. That's the best way. There's no other way around it. There's no other way to say it. That's what you did. And it didn't help any that in her own way she destroyed me, that she solicited friends. And most parents, I'm a parent. Well, I happen to be a parent that does not call friends for advice when it comes to my children. If me and my husband can't figure it out, then so be it. I don't reach out for help outside of my home. And the reason being is because I watched my mother do it. I watched her call her friends and, tell them, oh, she's such a bad kid. And it's like, I don't think that I did anything that a normal teenager would not do. To be quite honest, I still to this day don't even know what I did that was so wrong, other than respond in the most appropriate manner for the situation. You hit me. It wasn't that I wanted to hit you back. It was a reflex. You hit me, I hit you back. And that one thing she holds over my head. And I cannot seem to escape it. It's like when she tells her friends, oh, she put her hands on me, but did you tell your friends that you held me down by my throat trying to choke the life out of me? Did you tell them that? Did you tell them that you broke a coffee table on my back? Did you tell them that you took an extension cord to my legs and made me crawl? Did you tell them that you cut me with a knife? Oh, no, you didn't. Did you tell them that when I cut school, my reward was to get my hair cut off? You didn't tell them any of that. No, you didn't have to, because the reason why you cut my hair off was because it was a suggestion from your friend. It's something that she did to her child. And that made me never trust friends. Seeing my mother's experience with her friends and how they would give her advice to handle me, friends just didn't exist in my world. Like, I had a couple of them, but to this day, honestly, a lot of people don't know what I experienced because I just learned to keep it all inside, and I just never really shared very much of myself with anybody. It put me in situations that were very uncomfortable because I just kept experiencing a multitude. It got worse. As I got older, it began to get worse and worse and worse. And it was just like, when she realized that I was becoming taller than her, when I was, I was finding myself, I was starting to develop my character. She had to find new and inventive ways to put me down. And cutting my hair was, I guess, the only way she could see fit, because I was very vain. Growing up, and it's not something I'm proud of, but in our culture, it's something that exists. Colorism. And I used to think, oh, I'm light skinned, I got this long, beautiful hair, I'm bad. And that, for me, cutting my hair off was a reality check. Like, it was like, girl, are you as pretty as your hair is, or are you pretty because you are pretty inside and out? And I was like, I couldn't figure it out. I just knew that I was destroyed. My self-esteem was destroyed. And thankfully, I have always been blessed. I don't like to use the word blessed because I feel like words have alternate meanings. And when you start to break down the etymology of words, you look at them differently. And when you spell blessed, it's B-L-E-S-S, be less. So I try not to use that word because that's what I feel like. When I say, oh, I'm blessed, no, I'm actually speaking negatively on myself. So what I would say is I have an abundance of people in my life who have been good to me. And in that moment, when my mother cut off my hair, it was one friend that knew my truth. And I don't know why I trusted her enough to call her. Maybe it's because I cut school with her. But she knew my truth. And her and her mother, I'll never forget, they came to my house. And at this time, not only did my mother cut off my hair, but her friend also suggested that she take away my clothes. So she left me with no clothes for the school years. I had 2 bras. I had about maybe 3 pairs of panties, you know, 2 school shirts and a pair of pants and a thin jacket. And my friend, you know, came over with her mom, and she liked to do hair. So my mother had just taken it and just chopped it all up. And what she tried to do was she tried to, you know, create a style so that I wouldn't feel uncomfortable when I got to school. Thankfully, I had friends who would bring me some of their clothes to wear when I got to school so that people didn't laugh at me because I was wearing the same thing every day. And the strange thing about it is, when you're surrounded by that kind of positivity, you don't have time to dwell in the negativity. It's either fight or flight. And I use that opportunity to fly. Not fight, but fly. And the more I began to see my mother's ugly side, the more I started to run away. I started to indulge in things that were not safe for me. And again, like I said, by this time I had already had a boyfriend. He was 18. He had his own little place. I'm like, yeah, girl, I would run away. I'm gonna stay here. But I still had that PENS petition. And even though she did not let me go to the restricted facility, it was still in place. And the more I chose to act out, the more I would be in court. And finally, the judge, you know, we went to court one day and my mother was just like, and this all came about because we had an incident. By now, my grandmother had passed away and I was in my 2nd year of 9th grade. And it was just, my mother said something to me that forever changed. If she didn't change the way I looked with the Cabbage Patch and cut my finger, she changed the way I looked at her when she said this to me. She told me that I killed my grandmother. And for a long time, I sat with that. And sometimes I still have to battle that thought, that memory, that experience, because at 13, 14 years old, I'm taking care of my grandmother. And the situation was my grandmother had a home attendant. And because she was hospice, she needed 24-hour care. But there was this little gap in between the change of shift. And I was responsible for opening the door for the home attendant during that change of shift. And this particular night, the home attendant had said my grandmother sounded bad. She was gurgling, but she just something didn't seem right. But I had spent the whole night sitting up watching my favorite TV show, Flavor Videos, and I was tired and I fell asleep in between that shift change. And I fell asleep to the point where I didn't hear the doorbell ring. And finally, my grandmother lived in a building that had, you know, a doorman. So they were ringing. And finally, they got me to get up, buzz the home attendant in. When she came upstairs, you know, I'm in a daze. Like, I just woke up. She, you know, went to do her regular routine. And by the time she got to the back of the house to check on my grandmother had passed away. So for a very long time. And that was the foundation as to why I wanted to commit suicide, because it was like I couldn't even do one simple thing. I could not stay awake to keep my grandmother alive. I swear I'm not gonna cry. But that's something that sits with me. And at 41, I still struggle with that because even though now I know it was nothing that I could do, I couldn't have changed it. She was going to die regardless. I loved my Nana. And I would have done, even at 13, I would have done anything to save her. But, you know, I couldn't have done anything.
So well, let me just stop you right there and let you know and encourage you that you had nothing to do with your grandmother's death.
Thank you.
And that is a heavy load to put on a child, and it's not fair because you were 13. So actually, you shouldn't even have to take care of your grandmother.
Come on now. Come on.
That was your mom's job or your uncle's, not you. So I just want to encourage you and let you know you did not have anything to do with that. And I would encourage you to forgive yourself because you've been carrying that load for too long.
I struggle with that. I struggle with giving myself grace. And I think, and I appreciate you saying that. Thank you. I needed to hear that. And I need to reiterate it to myself more than I do. because there are times like September when her birthday comes, I try to keep myself as busy as possible. When October comes, her birthday is September 29th, she passed away October 4th. So I try to stay busy, but sometimes it creeps in there, especially when I think about the fact that I don't remember what she sounds like, or if she was to appear in the room. I know what she looks like, but if she was to call me, I wouldn't hear her. And the fact that my kids would never have that experience, that's what I struggle with. But when your mother tells you, your mother, the one person that you know from the inside out that has molded you into this person, when they tell you that you are a killer, it never sat right with me. And in that moment that she said it, I kind of blacked out. She was hitting me in the process. And I never forget, my cousin was there. She was visiting from Brooklyn, and she was in the living room, and me and my mother, I don't know what the argument was about, but the argument ensued and we were in the room. And she was like, and that's why you killed your grandmother. And my mother is 6 foot even. At the time, she was about 300 pounds. And I was about 110 soaking wet. But when I say the spirit of rage embodied me, I pushed her down into a coffee table and she fell into it and it broke. And I was getting ready to commence to whooping my mother's behind until my cousin came in the room and kind of got me off of her. And I don't know whether she knew what to do or what, but she dragged me to the living room. And in the process, my mother called the police and had me arrested. And in that moment, I was okay. Like, I don't have to go back home to you. The police gonna come get me. And to this day, I'm known as the only female in the projects in which I grew up to walk out the building in handcuffs. A lot of the guys respected me behind it, but it was like, bro, you wouldn't respect me if you knew why. Like, I hit my mother, but the guys that knew me, they didn't know all of my traumas, but they knew about some of the traumas. And I call him my brother. He lived next door to me. He could hear through the walls my mother beating on me, and I love him to death. His name is Dewan. He passed away, but he protected me a lot. There was a situation where before this whole incident happened, where my mother was whooping me, and I was just like, I'm not going to take it anymore. So I ran out the house with no clothes on, and we lived on the 15th floor, and I had I had 3 boy neighbors. One was a set of brothers, and Dewan, who lived right next door to me. I used to hang out with them. I was the only girl on the floor, and I felt safe hanging out with them. So, we would be at each other's house all the time. So they knew me and they could hear what was going on. I ran out the house, and again, I'm on the 15th floor with no clothes on. And my mother went down the hall to the neighbor's house, and she told their mother and father what was going on and enlisted them to help me. And Dwan was across the hall, so they knocked on the door. 1 went down on the elevator, and 2 chased me down the stairs. And I laugh about it. I can't laugh too much about it now because Dwan is not here with us, but he used to always say, I never knew how fast you can run. So you run like a jackrabbit. They were trying to chase me down the stairs. And I mean, in the projects, you can find just about anything in the staircase. And I was throwing lampshades back at them, just trying to get away. And it was so crazy because once I got down to the lobby, instead of me running out the door, but because I had no clothes on, I didn't want to run out of the building. I cornered myself into the lobby, and they had got down, and we had 2 sets of staircases. So it was like one led to one entrance, one led to another, and they managed to come out at the same time. So I was cornered either way. And then the elevator opened up, and one of the brothers was in the elevator, and they was like, come on, Diana, you got to go back upstairs. And I'm like, no. So they like, you don't got no clothes on. They went to grab me, and I'm screaming, pray, 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 pray in the hallway. And not knowing in that moment what could have happened to them. So if somebody came in the building and they heard that and they saw me in the position that I was in, my friends could have spent the rest of their life in jail, And I think about that, but I also think about I was I had an abundance of love surrounding me, because when they got to me, I'm just like, they're like, Diana D, just calm down, relax, stop moving about. And I'm like, no, like, I don't want to go back there. And Dewan knew, and he knew why I didn't want to go back upstairs. He's like, well, come on. He was like, we'll go to my neighbor's name is Lucas and Gilbert. We'll go to Lucas and Gilbert's house. And I'm like, I don't want to go. Like, I don't want to go. Like, you don't have no clothes on. Like, come on, D. So we get on the elevator, we go upstairs, and we go to my neighbor's house for my mother to calm down. And their mother went down the hall and talked to my mother. And that sat with me for a while. So when this whole situation, when she told me I killed my grandmother and I threw her in the coffee table, it was a lot building up, a lot. And, you know, she didn't press charges, but of course it was on the record and the judge had to be notified. So my next court hearing, they asked me, what do I want to do? I said, I want to go to the group home. I don't want to go back there. Still protecting her, not telling her what transpired, telling them what transpired, still keeping her secret. Mind you, by this time, I had seen a doctor. I'll never forget his name. And I'll put his name out there, Dr. Van de Pure, because life is quite funny and paths will cross again. Dr. Van de Pure was my pediatrician. And I remember the one time that my mother tried to get help. By this time, it was too late because she had already punched me in the eye. She had bruised me up, but she took me to the doctor and she told Dr. Van de Pure that she abused me. He didn't do his due diligence and call anybody. You know, I guess I don't know what transpired, but I remember her taking me to that Montefiore clinic on 161st Street behind the courthouse. And it's funny how things come to you. But when I tell you, traumas will stay, they will live, they will become a part of your fabric, your DNA. That trauma did. And I never forgot that doctor's name because nothing ever came of it. I never went to therapy. I just went back home. I don't know what he said to my mother. I never knew what happened. But that sat with me. So when the judge asked, I'm like, listen, the doctor didn't do his job. I was in school. The teacher called and tried to get me help. But my mother transferred me out of the private school and sent me to the public school. So I learned to shut my mouth then. Now's the time I can speak up for myself. Send me to the group home, please. One way ticket right there. And I did. And that is when I was able to be exposed to life. No guidance, no anything. You just got people working in the group home, they documenting, and you free to do whatever. So I did whatever. I AWOL'd, I lived my best possible life. And by this time, the boyfriend I was dating long ago, I had broke up with, but he had got back in contact with me and now he was living upstate. So he was like, listen, come with me. So I said, oh yeah. I ran away from the group home and I was gone for about, I want to say almost 6 months. Group home never reported to my mother that I was missing. And I was just living my best life. And then finally, I guess something's in her decided to contact them and found out that I was on the run. In the process, I had wrote letters to a friend of mine, and I love her to this day, my friend Keisha. I wrote a letter to her. She was the only person that I did let know where I was. And she went and told my mother. She called my mother and she told her. And I'm thankful that she did it. At that time, I wasn't, but I'm thankful because the person that I was with was not responsible. And what could you expect from a 19, 20-year-old? By this time, I'm 16. Like, how do you expect him to be responsible for you? He just learned how to take care of himself, you know, and he hadn't paid the rent. So we had gotten evicted. And I was on the street. But by then, the cops had already knew where I was. And they had come to the house. And the first time I told them I didn't want to go because I didn't. I had a place to live. But by then, you know, by the second time, it was like, okay, I don't have nowhere to go. I have to go back home. And they took me to the precinct and I got on that bus, that one-way trip from Syracuse, Utica, New York, and went back home. And one thing that sits in my mind about that runaway was when I got off the bus at Grand Central Station in New York. No, excuse me, 42nd Street. When I got off the bus there, my mother was there and her best friend at the time was there. I didn't get a hug. I didn't get a, are you okay? she had an attitude because I ran away. But her friend embraced me, Sugar. I'm gonna say her name, Sugar. She embraced me. She loved on me. She was so happy to see me. And my mother was just mad. And to be honest, there are so many incidents that has happened in my life. They have become dark spots. I remember that transition off the bus. What happened in between there, I don't know. The next thing I remember is being in Walmart with my mother shopping. And by this time, I had found out I was pregnant from my little 6 months on the run. And here I am, 16 and pregnant. I was 16 and pregnant before it became a TV show. And, you know, it wasn't popular to be 16 and pregnant. And I remember going into the Walmart, and we were going to Pennsylvania to a family reunion. And I remember looking at a stroller as we were walking into the Walmart, and I was just looking. My mother looked at me and she said, "Well, what you gonna do?" I'm 16. I have no effing clue what I'm gonna do. I'm 16 with a baby growing in me. I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like, you done messed up from birth to now. Now's the time where you can redeem yourself. Like, I'm here. I don't want to be here, but I don't have nowhere else to go. You have been a piss poor mother to me from as early as I can remember to right now, where you have the opportunity to make it better, to try. I know you have to see that I'm scared. I don't know what I'm going to do. And you say, I better effing figure it out. So I didn't say anything. I didn't think about it. We went to Pennsylvania, and I say this a lot of the times, and when I say it, I have to find a better way of saying it. I always say that the Most High made the decision for me because I had a miscarriage. People who are heavy into religion, and I don't say spirituality because there's a big difference. People who are heavy into religion tell me, don't say that, don't say that. And I'm like, well, you know, you're a walking contradiction, because you'll say the Most High wouldn't give you more than you can handle. So did he give it to you or did he not? So if I say that he made the choice from me, why does that not resonate with you? Because you can go to a Bible text and tell me that the Most High won't give you more than you can't burden. But for me to say he made the choice for me, I'm wrong. You want to condemn me? So I try to choose my words, but that's the best way for me to say it. That's the only way that I can say it, because in that moment, I didn't know what I was going to do. And I went to the theme park, Kennywood. I'll never forget, we was in the wave pool. And I like to say one big gush of water hit me to a magnitude that caused this miscarriage. But to show you how immature, how frightened I was, I have to tell you what happened after that. In that moment, I didn't understand what my body was going through. But we ended up going back to my cousin's house, and my cousin had a basement, and all the young cousins would go downstairs and we would hang out. And I went to the bathroom and I began to bleed. And I didn't know what was going on, but I told my cousins, don't say anything, especially my cousin Andy, because she got a big mouth. Like, don't tell anything. Don't go upstairs. Don't tell my mother anything. Just be quiet. And they knew I was in pain. I was just there, curled up in the bathroom. And as I'm bleeding, I'm collecting the clots. Make that make sense. At 16, as an adult, I still don't get why I did what I did, but I was collecting clots. And I told my cousins, I said, you got to text my boyfriend. You got to text him. And when I text him, but beep him, because that was a thing at the time. You got to beep him. You got to beep him. And I'm like, what? Now I think about it, like, what the heck was he going to do? He's wherever he's at. Like, why are we paging him? But this is where my mind was. And I'm just like, don't tell my mother. Like, I'm petrified because I don't know what her response is going to be, whether she's going to help me, whether she's going to chew me up, whether she's going to curse me. I don't know what her response is going to be. I would much rather lay on the floor in this half a bathroom, in this basement, bleeding and not asking for help. That's where my mind was. And that's how she conditioned me. That's how traumatizing my life with this woman was. Finally, my cousin Andy said, listen, I ain't finna listen to you, girl. I'm going upstairs. I'm telling. And, they in Pittsburgh, they like cousin Shelly. I'm going to tell cousin Shelly. And I'm like, at this point, I had no choice. Like, and I'm glad she did, because they took me to the hospital, and the last thing I remember is being in the hospital room in such excruciating pain that I blacked out. But in the process, from what I was told, that was the last clot that I was passing, and it was huge. So it was just like, I guess my body said, we're going to knock you out. And when I woke up, I had an IV in me. I had to have a DNC, and I was alive and I was well. And I was a 16-year-old who wasn't about to be a mother. So what do you do when you're not about to be a mother? You go to the theme park the very next day again. And that's what I did. And I never talked about it. We never talked about it. We never sat down. We never had a discussion about it. It just was something that happened in Pittsburgh. That was that. We came home like it was nothing. Fast forward, I 16 to 18, I lived in that dark space that I don't even know what happened in that time frame. And then I became pregnant with my firstborn at 18. And that was a life changer for me, because I knew that I wasn't going to deal with this woman anymore. I'm going to become a mother. It wasn't a conscious decision. I had got a new boyfriend. And 6 months into our relationship, I got pregnant. It was just like, okay, I'm not about to do this. I'm an adult now. We're not going to do this. So I remember it so clear. I hadn't had a menstrual cycle for almost 5 months, but my menstrual cycle was never regular. And I called my friend and I was like, I haven't had my menstrual cycle. So she was like, come on, let's go to the free clinic. I'm like, the free clinic? What is that? And she's like, we're going to go to the free clinic. They're going to test you. So I went and I did a urine sample, and it came back negative. And I never forget what the lady told me. The lady told me, she said, oh, well, you must have an STD. She's like, you need to go to the doctor. And I'm like, STD? So I paged my boyfriend. I'm waiting at the payphone for him to call me back, and I'm cussing it out. You gave me something. You burned me. Oh my gosh, this, that, and the third. So I was like, he's like, I don't have nothing. I was a virgin. You a lie? Like, we going back and forth, back and forth. Now, mind you, I'm the promiscuous one. I'm out here in these streets. But when I got with him, I'm the type of person that if I'm in a relationship, I'm in a relationship. Even from a young age, I'm just solely focused on that person. And I'm like, it wasn't me. I didn't do anything. Like, you gave it to me. So my friend said, well, and I'll never forget where we were. We were on 149th Street and 3rd Avenue in the Bronx. And there's a bank, and then right next to the bank is 349 East 149th Street. And there's a payphone on the corner. And I was on that payphone on the corner, and the 349 East 149th Street is the Planned Parenthood. And my friend says, she's like, come on, let's just go in Planned Parenthood. They'll see you if you don't have no insurance. She's like, they'll see you if you're a student. And I remember going, because that's how I found out I was pregnant. My mother forced me to go to the Planned Parenthood and tried to force them to get them to tell her everything that was going on inside of me, but they couldn't. So she's like, let's just go here. So we went. And I'll never forget that ride up on that elevator. And when them doors open up into the Planned Parenthood, they had this basket and they had these bags. They call them the goodie bags. They had condoms. They had everything in it that you can use to have safe sex. And they were like, you're here for? And I'm my best friend at the time. She's like, she needs a pregnancy test. And they were like, all right, come to the back. And I'll go to the back, and Planned Parenthood had, they have an on-site lab, and they didn't ask me to pee on the stick. They wanted to take blood. And I'm like, you crazy? And they took that blood, and I sat and I waited. And I'll never forget, I sat in one of those nice comfy chairs, and they did the little swivel, and they came in, and they're like, well, congratulations. Excuse me, come again? You're pregnant. I'm what? You're pregnant. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And then they start tracking back to see how long it had been since I had my last menstrual cycle. And back in the day, Planned Parenthood used to do prenatal care as well. So they took me to the back, and they're like, come on, well, let's do a sonogram. Let's try to get an idea of how far along you are. And I had to have that one where they stick it up your hoop nanny. And child, she's like, oh my goodness, you're 4.5 months pregnant. Excuse me, come again. I'm what? Who? you're 4.5 months pregnant with a due date of February 24th, 2000. And I was in utter shock. And I got all the information. They gave me my prenatal vitamins, told me I could continue to come in there to get my prenatal care because I was, at that time I was 17. I hadn't turned 18 yet. I was still underage and considered a student, and it was free. And I'm like, okay, no problem. And now here I am dreading walking home because I didn't live far from the Planned Parenthood. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to tell this lady this. And she made the decision quite easy. I don't know what happened. I just know I walked in the door and we commenced to arguing. And I just said, you know what? I'm not even going to go back and forth with you. You won't see me no more. You won't see my baby. And I walked out and I left. And I went to her friend's house, Sugar, and I stayed with her until my 18th birthday. And then I went into the shelter. And I went into the shelter for, a while. I was in the shelter for the duration of my pregnancy. So my birthday's in November, just to give you context. My daughter was born in February. So I left my mother's house, I want to say September, October, probably the end of September, early October, and stayed with her friend for about a month and some change, and then went into the shelter. And right before I gave birth, my baby daddy, boyfriend at the time, he was gone now. He had gotten the information I was pregnant, never said anything to his parents, took a scholarship at Denmark Tech and left me here pregnant alone. But we were in contact, we write and call on each other. And it just so happened, I tell you, everything happens the way it's supposed to happen. And that's why I've realized that I was divinely created to share my testimony, because I've had so many avenues that led me to this point. Like, he could have went on and finished his degree in Denmark Tech, and this could have been a whole nother story. But that's not what happened. He got kicked out a week before I gave birth to our daughter. And he came home and had a conversation with my mother about where I was. And he's the reason why I ended up back in my mom's house before my daughter was born. And I was thankful, because who wants to be in a shelter with a new baby? But how soon I learned to regret being thankful and being in that place. Because after my daughter was born, my mother would put us out every morning at 5:00 in the morning, me and a brand new baby, in the street every morning, because her thing was, you can't be here pregnant, barefoot. You either gonna work or you're gonna go to school. Sweetie, I just had a baby. How am I gonna go to school? How am I gonna get a job? I got a brand new baby that's dependent on my every move. I can't get a job and can't go to work. So she's like, well, you're not gonna be here getting pregnant again. So when she left for work, I had to leave with her. And the thing that made that situation so bad is me and this young man had a child early in life. We are 18-year-old parents. He's still living with his dad. I'm living with my mother. I didn't have nowhere to go because his dad was on him about getting kicked out of school, not being able to provide for this baby that he didn't tell nobody about. They found out literally right before I gave birth. So it was just like, it was a whole lot of nonsense going on. But the blessing in that was, okay, well, when I got put out, I had to roam the streets. And I say the blessing in that, but it's really no blessing, because who wants to roam the streets from 5 a.m. to 8:00 in the morning, trying to figure out what to do? Nothing is open, only McDonald's. So I'm sitting in McDonald's, with the homeless people nursing their coffee, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do for as long as I'm going to do it, in order to get to his house at 8:00 when his dad leaves for work. And that was a routine for a whole month until my daughter got severely sick and was hospitalized. They had to do a spinal tap. They was, making sure she didn't have meningitis. She had to get an IV in her foot. But by the grace of the Most High, she just had a high fever. She had no virus, no nothing. But for me, that solidified, listen, this woman don't care nothing about you. She don't care about your offspring. She is just an evil woman. But I went back. And I went back until my daughter was a year. And then, that was a whole nother can of worms. When my daughter turned a year old, my mother claimed her on her taxes and didn't say anything to anybody. Her father went to claim her on his taxes and got audited. So a big argument ensued. And of course, he was mad because his thing was, listen, this is my child. My mother's argument was, well, I'm her child and we live in her house. She provides a shelter for us. And it was just like, but lady, you almost got evicted. And this same man who was working as a busboy in Sylvia's restaurant did everything he can to get the money to make sure that his baby mother and his daughter didn't get put out on the street. He came to you with enough money for you to go to Catholic charities and the rent relief program so that they can help you pay your back rent. And you claim his daughter on your taxes and don't say anything, and then have the audacity to get upset when he says something about it. So she put me out, and I went to go live with him and his mother. Well, I went to go live with him and his dad, but that didn't last too long because being teenage parents can bring a lot of stress, a lot of strife, a lot of animosity. You start to learn people, and then, that's old saying, it's so true. You never know a person till you live with them. And I was able to learn a lot about him in that moment. Though I thought I loved him, I learned that he had his own demons and he came from his own situation. He was a product of, a loving marriage, but then they divorced. And they divorced when he became a teenager, but he was holding on to that and was angry about that, which led him to have happy hands, as I like to call them. And in the process, we were at his dad's house and a situation ensued and he laid hands on me. And I said, oh, okay, hold on. Run to this kitchen. Came back with this knife. And his dad was like, oh, well, we're not going to do is pull a knife out on my son. So you got to go, you and your baby. So I got put out at his dad's house and went to go live with his mom. That didn't turn out well. I forgave him. He came and he lived there with us. And a situation ensued again where me and him got into an argument and he picked up my daughter as I was throwing a garbage can at him and used her to block, and she got hit in the process. And that's when I realized that this is not going to work. I need to go. Like, I need to get on my own. I need to find my own place because I done went from one toxic situation to the next, and it's not getting any better. His mother was at that time was a toxic individual because she had her gambling problems. His brother was toxic because he was gambling. He was toxic because he didn't know how to control his anger. And for a long time, I used to blame myself. Like, oh, okay, well, it's me. I don't know how to talk to people. And I don't. My husband tells me this all the time. He's like, you don't know how to talk to people. You don't know how to say things. But what I respect about his opinion of me is he lays it out where nobody else did. It was just like, okay, well, you don't know how to talk to anybody, and I'm gonna lay hands on you. Well, my husband now is just like, you can't keep talking to me like that and don't think that you're not gonna get a response. Whereas my previous was like, papa, here's that response. So when my daughter got hit, I realized that I can't be here. I need to go. And his mother wouldn't let me go. She tried to block me from leaving the house with my daughter. And we were tussling, and my daughter was in her stroller. And she was pulling one side of the stroller, and I was pulling the other side of the stroller out the door. And my daughter got caught in the door. I enlisted a friend for some help, and they took two of us. I went inside, I calmed down, called a friend. I'm like, all right, I got to get out of here. And then she came to help me. And mind you, we still going through this tussling in and out the door. I'm like, listen, let go of my daughter's stroller. This is my child. Like, I don't give a damn about your son. This is my daughter. And I'm not going to stay here. Finally, she got the message and let her go. And that very day, I made the life-changing decision to go into the shelter and not leave for anybody. And I lived in the Covenant house, and that place saved my life. I lived in the Covenant house with my daughter for a year. And I was able, not to say my mother, now let me just backtrack. My mother is, I'm not gonna say was, because she still very much is to this day, an evil person. But in her evilness, she has taught me things. She's taught me to be independent, taught me to be responsible. That's all the accolades I can give her right now. But she did, she would make sure that I would go pay the rent, learn how to pay the rent, learn how to pay the cable bill, how to divvy up my check and be responsible in that shape, form, and fashion. So when I went to the shelter, they had a program which was called a mother and child program that allowed me to pay rent, pay daycare, get a job. You know, they taught me additional independent living skills, how to balance my checkbook. And those were all things that I needed in order for me to be productive in society. And that helped a lot. It helped a lot. After a year of being there, I got my first apartment, which you would think I would have left my mother alone after that, but I didn't, because what daughter does not yearn to have a relationship with their mother? And I just kept giving her chance after chance after chance. And I say I kept giving her chance after chance because the reality is that's what I was doing. I could have been made the decision not to deal with my mother at all. When I ran away to Utica, I could have stayed there. I didn't have to take the help of the police. I could have just went on and started hustling, because that's what they was doing up there. I could have hustled and figured out a way. I could have became a stripper, because that's what I was looking at. You know, I wasn't old enough to get a job, but I had a body. You know, I could have done that. I didn't have a GED because I had gotten left back in the 9th grade 3 times. So I didn't really have much going for me other than my good looks. And it was like, well, I kept coming back because I was hoping, now I realize I was hoping that my mother would change. My mother would see that for every action, as she always tells me, there's an equal reaction. I was not born the way she thinks that I was born. Just like I don't believe people are born with mental health issues. We create them. We cause people to have mental health issues with the conditioning and the trauma and the abuse that we put upon them. This is how people become mentally disabled. This is how people become, you know, bipolar, because they have to create a protection from themselves. They have to be able to function in the world. And that's my take on it. Now, the books will say otherwise. I'm sorry. There's no way in HE double hockey sticks that somebody is born with a mental disease. Environment, culture, all of this plays a part in your development, whether you choose to believe it or not. And the textbook tells you that. However, then they negate the fact that this can create a mental disorder. That's a contradiction to me. I never got it, but so be it. So for me, it was like, okay, I could have done this, but I didn't. I came home. I'm willing to try. You know, I've tried to do things your way. And the minute you showed me who you are, I had to give you a reaction, whether it be running away, whether it be hitting you, whether it be cursing and yelling and screaming at you, because this is all that I know. When you talk to me like I'm not worth sugar, honey, iced tea. You treat me as if I'm at the bottom of the barrel and I'm your child. I grew inside of you for 9 months. It was your job to protect and love me, to bring me into this world safe. And then when you did, you beat on me. You tortured me. You traumatized me. And to this day, have not taken any accountability for it. And I could be bitter about it. And for a long period of time, I was. But it took a response that she gave me for me not to be in that mood anymore. And, you know, after having my daughter and living in the shelter and moving out of the shelter into my own apartment, I realized that at that moment, I had a sense of freedom that she could never take from me, because she didn't get me there. Her actions caused me to move into that direction, but I would never give you credit for what I chose to endure to better myself for my child. And she came to the shelter. She came in her little car, trying to get me, crying. You know, you got a room, you could come back home. No, baby girl. Nah, you can keep that. I have a child of my own. I'm not interested. I don't want to come back to your house. I'm good. I'm going to stay right here. I'm going to ride it out. And I'm thankful that I did, because my daughter is going to be 23. And that has been 21 years ago that I never looked back. I packed up, I moved into the shelter, I got my own. And from there, it's just been a snowball effect of me just doing what I needed to do. Now, that's not to say that it didn't come without more trauma, because as I got older, she learned, okay, she can't put her hands on me anymore, but she can do things to antagonize me, to infuriate me. I can never say that word, but to just drive a wedge in between me, my child, my partner, my life. And she did. Because as I got older, it got worse. You would think that I would learn after this man put his hands on me not to go back, but I did, because that was the love that I knew. And I got pregnant a second time. And in that process, you know, I didn't tell my mother I was scared. I was petrified. Mind you, in between all of this, we trying to work it out. We trying to build a relationship. We done went on vacations together. She done embarrassed me on vacation. Went on vacation to Dominican Republic, and she cussed me something stink. Like, here we are, we trying to build. We on a mother and daughter vacation. You would think that this woman would share this experience with me. Now, she done been to Dominican Republic several times. This was my second time going. This is the first time without my child. I was going to celebrate my birthday, my 24th birthday, and she brought all her friends, and she had this friend that came, and this was her first time coming. She never told this lady, listen, get money before you get to the Dominican Republic. And we were out on an excursion, and we went to another hotel, and she's like, I need to get money. She didn't anticipate that the ATM was going to give her pesos. And I never forget, we're sitting there, we waiting, and the lady comes, and she's like, it gave me pesos. And my mother snapped on her. She's like, how dumb could you be? How could you come on vacation and not bring cash, this, that, and the third? And I'm like, dang, why are you talking to her like that? Like, and this is what she told me. Shut the F up and mind your MF business. And I did. I didn't say anything else. I didn't say anything else for the duration of the trip. She didn't speak to me. And what made this situation all the more worse is I didn't have my own room. I was doubling up with her and her friend. So her friend wasn't speaking to me. Mind you, I was coming to her defense. My mother's not speaking to me, and I'm on vacation with all of her people. So now this vacation has become the vacation from hell because I'm alone. I don't have anybody to be on vacation with. You know, a lot of people was like, oh, well, you could have just had a good time. That wasn't the reason for this experience. It was to build with my mom, and that didn't turn out that way. So, you know, when I got pregnant with my second daughter after this particular, I didn't say anything. I just wasn't. And I knew I was pregnant with her. I knew I was pregnant with her for a while. And it just so happened, I don't know what happened at work, but she called my job, and she was like, the job told her that I'm not there. And the reason why the job told her I was not there is because I had passed out, and I was taken away in the ambulance, and they let her know. And she's like, well, what happened? And I'm like, well, excuse me, my child is knocking on the door. They're like, well, what happened? And I'm like, okay, yes, baby, you can have a snack. She asked for a snack, sorry. They're like, well, what happened? And I'm like, well, I'm pregnant. And the job told my mother that I was pregnant. And she ended up at the hospital with an attitude. She didn't say anything, but she kept it really quiet. But she had an attitude, and I could tell. My second pregnancy with my second daughter was a blur because my mother had did so many different things during that time. It was just like, to be honest, it created a wedge between me and my second daughter. I had no attachment to her. And to this day, I very much still struggle with having an attachment to her. I tell people this all the time, and it's my truth, and I'm not proud of it. I don't like her. I struggle with that a lot. And that is because of the conditioning that I endured during that pregnancy. The way my mother treated me during that pregnancy, I just was not happy. It was not a happy pregnancy. So when she was born, it was just like, yeah, another child, another mouth to feed, no attachment. And to this day, I think I'm still struggling 16 years later with postpartum depression. And what made my daughter's situation with her, what made it all the more worse is she did not bottle feed. She did not take a bottle. She couldn't latch to a bottle. I had to breastfeed. And I was so against it that I would go in the bathroom in the pitch black and feed her. Like I would close myself up in the bathroom, feed her, and I would just be like, even when I went somewhere, if I went to somebody's house, I would lock myself in the bathroom to nurse her in the dark. Like I didn't want to see her. I didn't want to look at her. I didn't want to have any attachment to her at all. It was just that I just didn't like her. And as the more she grew up, the more I realized, like, I just don't like this girl. And I don't know why. And it's till now that I realize what it is. Most people, when they see us, they'll say that's Diana 2.0. She looks identical to me. She is me in the flesh, reborn again. And this is what makes me cry, because this is what the conditioning will do when your mother doesn't wholeheartedly love you. For me, I realized in doing my shadow work and doing self-healing, just trying to get to know myself better, is when I look at my daughter, I see all the years that I lost, that I can't get back, that I can't fix, that I can't address, that I can't tackle. And she makes me resent her, because it's like looking in the mirror. I don't see anything. I don't see anything of her father. I don't even see her as her own self. I see me. And I struggle with it. I'm not proud of it. It hurts me. And I explain to her all the time, because I'm very abrasive and aggressive when dealing with her. Out of all my children, she is the only child that I know sometimes feels like she is not loved, and I hate it. It makes me miserable. It makes me sad, because I know she didn't do anything to deserve it, but it is just the experience that I had with the pregnancy of her that I can't seem to shake. And I've told therapists this, and they look at me like, color with her. Try to do things to bond with her. And I'm like, dude, what part don't you understand? I don't want to bond with her, because I see me. I see all the things that my mother didn't do with me, and you're asking me to do it. And like, I resent her. Like, how do we fix this? Make it make. And they never could give me an answer. And I now realize, because it's what I'm studying to be, that as a position, as a helper, as they call them, or a counselor, you give your client the tools and they figure out the resolution.
Yes. Yes.
And sitting and coloring is not a tool for me. Okay. It's testing my patience. Mm-hmm. But then I realized that's the tool in order to have the patience. So I really try my hardest with her, because she is me.
Yes.
She
is. Ask, do you, because of all the trauma that you dealt with your mom, and you're saying that she looks exactly like you,
yes,
which is a blessing, and it's not BS, it is a blessing. Listen, you get a chance to do something different with her. So you can look at it that way. And I do I can't say that I completely understand, because I have boys. So okay. I don't have girls. But have you guys gone to any kind of therapy?
And that's the scary thing. So we have gone to therapy. And the funny thing is, she was diagnosed with attachment disorder.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, yeah, but as much as she want to be attached to me, I don't want to be attached to her. Like, make that, where's the cord? Make it make sense. Mm-hmm. And I could never understand it. It's like, we weren't close, but then I think about when she was really, really little. She slept in the bed with me till she was 6.
Okay.
So I can understand why she may have attachment disorder. For me, it was comfort, because her dad, even though I said I wasn't going back to him and he was happy with his hands, I stayed with him for a long period of time until she was 2. Mm-hmm. So she was 2 and the oldest one was 8 or 9. I stayed with him, and she was comfort during those times that he wasn't there, because he had a disappearing issue. He would tell me he was going to the store and wouldn't come back for 3-4 weeks at a time. So it definitely, she became my comfort, my go-to, because my oldest, she was doing her own thing. She wanted to sleep in her own bed. But I couldn't, when the therapist told me that, I'm just like, well, I don't see it. But then I had to think back to, okay, she slept in my bed for the first 6 years of her life. She rubbed on me, this is what she knows. But that made me scared. And my response to being scared about her being attached to me showed up as anger. So then I would be angry at her. I would get, like, to see us together, you would think that we were closer than what we are. And a lot of the times I say things to her and she brushes it off, but I say them in a way it's like, girl, if you don't leave me alone. But she thinks I'm joking. I'm dead serious. Like, girl, if you don't get away from me, I don't really like you like that. You get on my nerves. Please stop talking to me. But she's very lighthearted. So she forces me to interact with her. And the more I interact with her, the more I realize she's not me.
Right.
We just have a lot of similarities. And that makes me angry.
And may I say this, you are not your mother.
And that's what I struggle with. That is the struggle. Because when I see her, I look at myself and I see my mother. And I struggle with trying to not be her, to the point where I try so hard that it's at a detriment to my family. Because I overindulge, I overgive, I do too much to the point where either they feel like they're being smothered, or they feel like, okay, Ma, like, we're not being smothered at this point, but I don't really like you doing this for me. And it's like, that's me trying to be giving. So it's hard to find the balance.
Yes.
But I'm learning and I'm working
within
it. So I've tried little by little, like, okay, she doesn't ask her dad to drive her to work. She asks me because I realized this is me and her time. So, we bond over music, and I'm really trying to get away from seeing her as me, because I made a lot of mistakes parenting. My first daughter, I'm struggling now with apologizing. I've been apologizing to her for as long as I can remember. I think since she turned 16, I've just been apologizing because I did things to her that I'm not proud of. Like, the last time I put my hands on my daughter was so bad. And the response that I got from my mother, because at that time I was talking to her, made me realize I could never do this again. My daughter had a science project. I felt like she was lying to me about getting the science project done. I beat her and I slammed her head against a lock. That sits with me. I can never undo that trauma that I have caused to her. I can never fix it. I can never heal it. But I'm honored and I'm humbled because she has forgiven me.
Forgiveness is key. And may I ask, have you forgiven your mother?
To an extent.
Okay.
I say that because in recent times, as early as I want to say 2019, 2020, she had an incident in her building. And again, I've moved from New York. I live in Virginia now. I left 10 years ago. I left after my son was born because that was an incident. My mother said something to me that'll never change. My son was born with his cord wrapped around his neck. He was born blue. He wasn't breathing. She was in the hospital room, didn't want to go check on him. She didn't want to do anything. And 14 days after he was born, she told me I should humble myself after seeing my son being born dead. My husband, my new husband at that time, he told me, he said, that's it. We're done with this woman. We will never speak to her again. He's like, as long as I got breath in my lungs, she will have nothing to do with my son. Most women, who want to fight for a relationship with their mother would be like, no. To be quite honest with you, I don't know how people feel about soulmates, but for me, I've had a twin flame in my life, and my husband is my soulmate. He is the person that has released the blinders off of my eyes. I tell people all the time, he is the eyes that I cannot see with. He is the hands that I can't catch with. He is the feet that won't walk away. He is my other half. And from the very first day that he met my mother, the first thing out his mouth was, I don't like this woman. And I was like, boy, you crazy? He's like, I don't like your mother. He's like, I don't like her. And I couldn't understand why until that moment. And I said, I hate to acknowledge this, but I will. 99% of the time, he is right when he gets a feeling about something. He has never steered me wrong. And that's why I say I have been fortunate enough to be, the Most High has guided me, has put people in my life to protect me from the elements, has put people in my life to protect me from how bad it probably could have been. And I say that because what if my grandmother wasn't here for those first 13 years of my life? It could have been a whole lot worse. She could have cut my throat instead of my pinky. Yeah. She could have beat the hell out of me about those Happy Meal toys. She could have found me in that toy box, and she could have been the one to throw me off the terrace. But my grandmother was there. You know, she didn't interject as much as she would have liked to, but I had somebody to go to. You know, I felt safe there. Now, my grandmother didn't witness everything, but she knew enough to make me feel protected. Then I've been surrounded by Jehovah's Witnesses. I don't know what that's about, but they have been in my life heavy, you know, and I've befriended a lot of them that have always given me the word or been ready to sit down and Bible study with me to help me opening myself up to the Most High. Then I've had, you know, friends that have looked out for me. So I say all of that to say, yeah, I forgave her to some extent, and until I realized that she's still very much a bitter person and an angry person. And my husband told me that I can't forgive her. And I'm like, boy, I got to forgive her. I got to forgive her for me. And he's like, you know, sometimes in life, some things you can just walk away from and shouldn't feel guilty about it. And he has always been on point with guiding me and helping to see things from a different perspective. And
well, I would say, as far as forgiveness goes, it's not for your mom, it's for you. It's to free you. So I'm not trying to, you know, say anything, you know, different from what your husband is saying, but
no. And
forgiveness is for you. It is not for her. So you need to free yourself.
And I believe I have, for the most part. And I think the one thing that holds me back to saying 100%. So if I had to give a percentage, I would say 85% of me has forgiven her.
It's a process. It's a process.
It is. And the 15% that lingers is because for me, the person that I am, and I'm still working this out, and I have to get this in my head. What I'm really trying to work out is you're not going to always get the response that you want. And that 15% that I'm holding on to is having the ability to address her and say everything that I need to say, let it go, release it, and then I'm done. That will give me 100% of healing, because I still have this trapped in me. Though I'm sharing my testimony with you, and I've shared this testimony on my platform, it's not the same until the person who has done it to you, you are able to confront them. And I have not had that opportunity to let her know, like, this is what you did to me. This is how you hurt me. This is how I feel. Now, I've tried to reach out to her. And I emailed her because I found out that she had her building had no power, no lights, no running water, no nothing. And I tried to reach out to her, and I emailed her because that's the only way I know how to contact her. And to be quite honest, there was a situation that ensued with a friend of hers that happened to be my age. I was 16, he was 18, and I did some things with him that grown people do. She got mad at me, and my thing is, you're a 30-something-year-old woman hanging out with a 18-year-old. He was closer to my age than he was yours. Why are you mad at me? You should be mad at him. I mean, if you want to consider him an adult. And neither here nor there. That's something that she holds on to. So when I emailed her, listen, I'm not emailing you for drama. I'm not emailing you to cause anything. I just want to know if you're okay. She emailed me back. Since when do you give a F about me? And she went into the spiel.
Well, she's got to heal on her own.
Exactly.
So you probably will, until she heals.
Okay.
You will never get the response that you're looking for.
Go ahead, baby. Exactly.
You'll never get the response. So, and you have to be okay with, if your mother leaves this earth and you don't get that response, you have to be okay with that.
So it's funny that you mentioned that. And I tell people this all the time, and I'm not proud of it, but I do it because sometimes it just makes the conversation a whole lot easier. When people ask me, I tell them my mother's deceased.
Well, she's not physically deceased.
Right.
To you, the relationship is non-existent. So
exactly.
I get that.
And that's how I process it. It's just like, okay, well, you know, that's what it is. And in my mind, I've had my own little funeral for her. I've definitely put her away as far as the traumas that she can cause me. I'm sorry, I want to close my door. I don't want my kids back in here. I've put away a lot of those things that she has done, and I just use them as a catalyst to teach other people, to share with other people that, listen, you know, you can go through these things, you can overcome them. Sometimes it takes a lot of time, but the first thing you need to do is give yourself grace. And I am an example of,
definitely,
it's a struggle to give yourself grace when you've been conditioned for so long. It took me to 40 years old for me to say, that's it. Yeah. You're not going to keep living like this. You're not going to keep crying about things that shoulda, coulda, woulda, or what you did wrong. I accept what I did. I accept and I acknowledge that I made some mistakes. There probably are moments in my life that I could change as far as, you know, dialogue with her. But what I'm not going to do is wear the burden. I'm not going to place this all on my shoulders, because the reality of it is I was born into this. I didn't ask for it. Mm-hmm. It was handed.
You can't pick your parents.
Exactly.
You can't. And everything that you have gone through, God is going to use it for your good and for his glory. So you sharing your testimony, your story, whatever you want to call it, is going to help somebody else to get free. And that is the most important reason, to help somebody get free, to share your story, to help somebody else to be able to forgive. You know, there's somebody that has a story that's similar to yours. It's going to help. It's going to help them to realize, first of all, that they're traumatized. Right. And then it's going to help them to begin the healing process so they can get free, get whole, get delivered, so they can live the life and live the purpose that God has for them.
Come on.
That's the whole reason for sharing your testimony. Yes. Of course, you know, we don't like bad things to happen to us, you know. Of course, you know, nobody wants to be born into trauma, and nobody wants to experience it, but we do. That's life. So that's why it's important for us to share our story and begin sharing your story. Also helps you to begin the healing process. It helps you to begin that healing journey. Every time you share your story, another part of your life circumstances is being exposed, and then you're able to start healing from that. Yes. So Diana, thank you for your story. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. And you don't know how freeing it is. Then again, I'm sure you do know how freeing it is to be able to share your testimony and not have people ridicule you or question, or no judgment. And for a long time, that's what I had, judgment. And that's the reason why I shut down. But now, you know, with platforms such as yours and other platforms, and even mine, it allowed me to put a voice to the unheard cries.
Yes.
That people don't want to acknowledge, that persons of colors, because let's be very clear, it is us. It is our culture to just sweep everything under the carpet.
Yep.
Nothing happened. Oh no, Uncle Ruddy didn't do that, or Uncle Kenny didn't do that, or Uncle Mike didn't do that, Auntie so-and-so didn't do that. Bro.
And then that leads us to suffer in silence.
Exactly.
Because what happened in this house stays in this house. So then we don't have an outlet.
Exactly.
So again, everybody, this is a free platform for you to share your story. All you have to do is hit me up. You can get me on Facebook. You can hit me on IG. You can email me at Juanita R. Williams 64@yahoo.com or Juanita R. Williams @gmail.com. Either way, if you want to share your story, this is a free platform for you to share your story. Diana, I thank you again for sharing your story. Listen, y'all go check her out on IG. Let me tell you, your life is going to be changed for real. Because listen, she's real and raw. It ain't no sugarcoating nothing. That's the way we need it. You know, there's no reason for us to be covering up nothing. We should be able to be free enough to share and not have people judge and condemn us. Because we don't have the right to do that anyway. Only God can do that. And God is not going to condemn you. He's not going to. Judgment is for Judgment Day. And it ain't for you telling your testimony. Okay, so let me stop before I start preaching.
Okay.
So, Thank you again, Diana, for sharing your testimony, y'all. She's got a book in the works. I'm just putting that out there. She has a book in the works, and you will hear her full testimony there. And go follow her on IG and listen to her story. Listen, tell your friends, tell your sisters, tell your aunties, whatever, because we need to heal, especially women of color. We need to heal. There's no competition. That ain't even what this is about. Not at all. We just want to share so we can help somebody else to get free. So my name is Juanita Williams. I am a purpose conduit. I am the link to life beyond pain and the channel to discovering purpose. And this is today's Tuesday Truth. Next week, I will be sharing my testimony. So stay tuned. I know some of you have heard it already, or some parts of it, but stay tuned because I'll give you some tips and tools to help you either begin your healing journey or to continue your healing journey. Diana, any final thoughts?
Just keep doing what it is that you do. You know, sometimes it's gonna be a struggle, but just know that you can get through it. If you need a friend, hit me up on Astro Speaks on IG. I have a lot of people that just reach out and just ask for advice. I try to give the best possible advice that I can, and we can heal together. You don't have to do it alone.
There you go. Listen, you have several people out here that support you. So listen, you don't have to be afraid. You can private message us and, we'll be a listening ear, or, if you need some advice, we're here to share with you. Again, this is Juanita Williams. This is Tuesday Truths, and I'll see you next week, God willing. Bye-bye now.